Hello, everybody. It's Roger Hall here. I'm here with Paul Ransbury, and Paul has got a large audience on LinkedIn to do with aviation. We're going to talk to Paul today, and both of our careers seem to have mirrored a similar pattern in Canada in the beginning, and from there we diverged. So we'll get into that. So where are you today, Paul?
Yeah, so today, Roger, first off, it's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to do this with you. It's just, we've been connected for a little while now, so I'm excited about that. And especially, I didn't know we were so married up at the initial part of our careers there, being in the military, then Canada 3000 before you went off to Emirates. So I'm excited about today's talk, but I'm in Queen Creek, Arizona right now, which is where my home is. And I'm in my home office, which came about from COVID-19 when the APS program or training, unfortunately, became a non-essential flight training requirement in Arizona. So we unfortunately had to find other ways to keep busy. And in fact, that's a genesis for a lot of the work I'm doing now, which is creating video and training and remote engagement of audiences. But I'm just about 15 minutes away from our headquarters here at the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. So, it's maybe a 10 and 15 minute drive at the most, depending on traffic. But we moved down here to Arizona from Canada, 25 years ago now. So it's been really exciting, but I think we're going to get to that. But that's it's hot though. So I'm in Queen Creek, Arizona, and right now it's already over 100 degrees.
Okay. But maybe a bit of a dry heat in the desert, eh?
It's a dry heat, but it's hot.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Where I am in Dubai today, it's also hot, but it's humid as well. Sometimes it goes like 85, 90% humidity, which makes it even worse. Yeah. So tell us about how you got started in aviation. I know you went to military college in Canada. So how did you get interested in aviation and how did you start flying?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I wasn't one of those kids that were at the airport watching airplanes all the time. I was more into hockey and baseball and different things like that and very engaged in that type of activity. But, the whole time I was growing up, my father was a private pilot and I had several uncles in the Canadian military. One was a F-104 starfighter pilot, Sabre pilot. Okay. And my other uncle was a C-130 navigator. And so I always thought they were really cool guys. And so when I got to the end of my high school career as a young man, I decided I was going to be one of two things. Either I wanted to be a fighter pilot like my one uncle, or I wanted to be a chiropractor like my father. And as it turned out, I thought, well, let me take a run at being a fighter pilot. And that's how I ended up at the Royal Military College of Canada, Roger. And I was selected as part of the aircrew selection process to be a pilot like you were. And when I went to college, I decided to pursue mathematics and physics, and which has been really wonderful and something I've used throughout my entire life in my role, not only now but back then in the military.
Right. Okay, and which province was that, Paul, that you grew up in before you went to military college? Which is in Kingston, right? Milcall?
Right, yeah. And so, my hometown was north of Toronto in Ontario, at a little town called Wyerton, Ontario. A lot of pilots know where Wyerton is because there's a VOR there, but it's actually
that's right.
For the Americans out there who have Puxatawny Phil, where in Wyerton, that was Wyerton Willie, the Canadian version of the groundhog. And that was where my little town of 2,000 would turn into a town of 15,000 for about 3 days once a year for the Wyerton Willie Groundhog Day.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so you went into military college, and did you start flying while you were also going to college there? Did they let you start flying at that time?
Yeah, so in military college, the Royal Military College in Kingston, particularly, there's 3 of those colleges in Canada, and that particular one, the way it would work is on the first off, you have to get through the aircrew selection process. So I was able to do that before getting started with the Royal Military College time. But the first year was language training, and then the second year, after the second year of academic training, we go out and do our selection process in the Musketeer. I don't know if you flew the Musketeer out there.
Yeah, I did. I did in the winter.
Yeah, but I'll tell you though, Roger, that of all the things I've done, from the fighter weapon instructor course to my type ratings and everything else, that was probably the hardest course I ever did, because I only had 1 hour of previous flying experience going in there when I got a familiar
it's not
flight.
easy.
It's
Not
not.
easy if you, yeah, that's
I
right.
know.
And you're doing things on that course, I mean, flying inverted and loops and all kinds of
Oh
stuff
yeah.
that many pilots in the civilian world, they never do, so,
Well,
and
you
you're
just
doing it with 40 or 50 hours.
Well, exactly. Yeah. You sit there and they tell you in the first day that look to your left and your right. If you're still here, they won't be, most likely. You know how that
Right.
goes, about a third of the people. But
Yeah.
you're right. But at the time, not knowing any different, I just assumed that's how pilots are trained. It didn't even occur to me that loops and rolls and everything else were unique. And that's kind of the philosophy we bring into our current contracts with flight schools, of making, that all attitude experience just part of how they become pilots.
Right. That's a great introduction. So after you finished military college, you went through, or while you were going there, you went through Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan, on the Tudor aircraft, and you knew that you wanted fighters at that time, the F-18, I imagine. So tell us about that stage.
Yeah, so after military college, I went on the job training in Goose Bay, Labrador. So they're building wooden tanks and everything else before I went to Moose Jaw. Then went to Moose Jaw right after military college, went through the program. And at that time, there was a split at about 120 hours where the helicopter guys would get split off and away they would go. And then the rest of the fixed wing operators would stay there. But yes, I did select fighters as my primary selection, and I was fortunate enough to continue from there into flying the F5 in Cold Lake at 419 Squadron, then for about 6 months, and then from there 6 months at Cold Lake at 410 Squadron, flying the CF-18. So that was about a year or so it took to get through that before getting to my first squadron.
Right. And was it everything you expected it to be, the F-18? Was it harder to fly, easier to fly, more powerful than you expected, or what was your impressions of the F-18?
Yeah, that was just awesome. I always have loved technology, so it was really cool to get into an airplane that was fly-by-wire, a lot of technology. I was shocked that when you go into the F-18, honestly, is you're only with an instructor for the first 3 flights, and then you're solo from that point on. So it was a very easy airplane to fly. But of course, very hard to use as a weapon. And that was where the key part of the training was really focused on. So really flying the airplane, the all attitude awareness maneuvering and the ability to function in that environment really had to be second nature. And I think that's one of the reasons, Roger, why we have fighter pilots predominantly as our instructors, is because they have an innate understanding of that environment and how to teach comfortably in that environment with people that have never been there, and very often are quite afraid the first time they get exposed to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So you could, a pilot going on to the F-18, he could maybe only have like 5 or 6 hours with an instructor, and then he would be going solo after that.
That's my recollection. I believe it was just the first 3 flights, and then off you were solo. Now, you did fly with instructors a lot through the program. You just weren't by yourself. Sure. They would teach you to, tactical formation and, basic fighter maneuvers and all sorts of things like that. So once you get to your squadron, though, you really are largely, solo, because in the Canadian Armed Forces, at least back then, is that it was primarily single seat fighters, and that's how we operated the F-18, and I believe they still do.
Okay. So did you fly anything else in the military other than the F-18 other than the F-5 and the other ones we've already talked about? Did you fly anything else?
My whole time was on the F-18. So when I went my first squadron, and I think the reason is because my first squadron was in the 425 Tactical Fighter Squadron, the Alouettes, in Bagotville.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough, I had the opportunity to go to the Fighter Electronic Warfare course while I was there. And then I ended up getting selected going to the Canada's Top Gun, the Fighter Weapon Instructor course, at the end of my first tour. And of course, when they invest that into you, they want to keep you around as a fighter pilot. So I stayed on to 416 Squadron for 3 years when I went back to Cold Lake after completing the Fighter Weapons Instructor course. And then that was my last squadron before I left to go into the real world and into, commercial flight operations.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Was it Canada 3000 you went to after you left the military?
I did. You know, it's funny because I went out of high school going, if I don't get to the college I want, I'm just going to take my motorcycle and pull queue and go for a year and just enjoy myself and play golf. And
Yeah.
sure enough, when I left the military, I thought, well, I'm going to apply to Canada 3000 because a lot of friends are there to see if I get it. And if not, I'm not too concerned about it. But sure enough, I got hired by Canada 3000. I had like 2 weeks between my last flight and the F-18 to off to my type rating in Miami at that time on the A320. And so that was I think it was in the summer of 1996, where, to your point, you just mentioned about how hot it is in Dubai. I remember being down there in Florida where all your clothes are wet in the closet, right? Because it's so humid. But that was a lot of fun. And that was really my first exposure, Roger, to, a crew operation. I was that typical fighter pilot that had the terrible attitude of, well, why do we need 2 people? We're just putting the gear up and down and taking off and landing. What do we need the crew for? Well, I'll tell you, that experience at Canada 3000, as you well know, they had excellent SOPs. Really one airline from a safety standpoint. And I just learned so much about the importance of the safe operation of an airline and crew and CRM and the importance of SOPs. So it transformed me very, very quickly into the right way to fly safely in civilian aviation is CRM, the crew, and the appropriate and safe functioning in the cockpit from a cultural standpoint and technical standpoint.
Right. So yeah, we would have been at Canada 3000. And for those of the people listening, that airline is no longer around. Unfortunately, it went bankrupt around 2002 or so, I think, which is a shame. So you were at Canada 3000 for how many years, and was it all on the 320?
It was all on the 320, and I left it just about 3 years after I started, because at the time when I left the military, one of the other things I was thinking about doing was going to fly F-18s for Australia. I thought that'd be kind of fun, but my roommate at the time, Paul Molnar, Pitch, he had a business plan about doing Air Combat Canada, so I said, well, that'd be fun. I'll do that. So I'm in no rush to go anywhere. And so went down, moved into Ontario, Burlington, Ontario, and moved there. And while I was flying at Canada 3000 Airlines, we were starting up Air Combat Canada. In fact, it became operational in around April of 1997. We started flying air shows and doing air combat, fighter pilot for a day kind of experiences. And we call them Flight of Your Life, aerobatic. It was a lot of fun. It was it went really, really well, and it grew quickly to the point where I left to do it full time in 1999. So I left a couple of years before Canada 3000 got taken out by 9/11. Right.
Now, at some point, you ended up in the USA somehow. So tell us about that. How did you end up in the US?
So in Canada, as we were doing all this, in that 1999 year where I left Canada 3000 Airlines, the company was doing really, really well, flying a lot. Now, I'll tell you, that's a big statement given the fact being in Canada where we would fight weather a lot. It would be of a 5-day week, we may fly 3 days. The other 2 days we're rescheduling people. Then in the winter, it's cold. But, the other thing that happened is we did an IMAX movie. We did a 3D IMAX movie with our air show team, which was a lot of fun. And we ended up down here in Arizona. And in that time period, we got an investor into our company that wanted to see us expand and grow our services. And so while we were down in Arizona, we were looking at airfields here in the Phoenix area, 7 different airfields. And simultaneously, we're going to expand in Canada, our current location. But we're having a bunch of issues there with noise and all the things that nobody even thinks about here at Gateway Airport with F-16s and 707s and 767s taking off all the time. So we moved down here in November of 2000 to expand and grow our company. Got a couple of new airplanes, and we came to it was actually called the Mesa Gateway Airport back then, but now it's the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. It was just a couple of years after it was transitioned from Williams Air Force Base. And so we renovated a 5,000-foot area, which used to be the old T-38 training squadron area. And we turned that into, at the time, what we called Fighter Combat International, because we were still primarily focused on the fighter pilot experience for a day. Even though we were doing a version of upset training at the time, it wasn't the priority of what our business was doing. So that's where we ended up, and that's how we got to Arizona. A couple of years later, we built our first facility in 2003.
Wow, that's starting to get into a big business if you're building your own facilities and everything. That's serious stuff.
It is. Unfortunately, in 2004, late 2004, there became an issue with the organization and the ownership where there needed to be a change. And so as it turned out, my wife and I had the opportunity of buying all the assets of Fighter Combat International and the intellectual properties, but giving up our ownership, if we in fact had any, in the original facility, which was a topic of the time, and became tenants in our own building for a number of years. And so at that point, though, it was very clear to me, and I think that's where some of the misalignment was happening, is that the future of our business was not in adventure flying. It was not in, the fighter pilot for a day, flight of your life. And so as we transitioned to aviation performance solutions as it is now, in late 2004, 2005, we now doubled down on saving lives. This is a training business. We have expertise from the military and our experience over the past, nearly 10 years at that time, 8 years of doing this, of how to maybe take this now, not just from a emergency maneuver training, piston airplane training program, but really start making this for professional pilots, because I had the opportunity of witnessing some deficiencies in civilian training that really made me become a believer in the critical importance of upset prevention and recovery training, back then called advanced maneuvering training.
Okay. And what kind of aircraft were you using at that time, Paul?
Yeah, we always had extra 300 piston aerobatic airplanes. The reason we initially got them because of the air combat part of our business and the air show, more the adventure flying. But as it turned out, the extra 300 was a fantastic surrogate platform to be able to teach transferable skills in a very safe environment, a plus or minus 10G airplane, unlimited maneuvering. And it became a great opportunity to be a training platform to be able to establish skill sets that the civilian pilots just did not have. And in fact, many military pilots didn't have them either, but in an environment where they could learn them quickly, but in very high fidelity human factors. And that's really the key gap, and we're going to talk about later, between what's missing in the training in today's pilots to truly be successful in mitigating or overcoming an airplane upset event. It's the potential incapacitating human factors that they experience. Whether or not they have the skills really doesn't matter if they can't overcome the human factors. And so the extra 300, because things can happen so fast and it's so nimble, yet if done properly, all the use of the flight controls can be directly transferable. It really became an ideal platform at that point. And that was just the first of a number of platforms, but we still use the extra 300 today. In fact, we have 8 of them in our hangar right now.
Okay, that's a big number. Yeah,
it is.
And and you also in the videos and in the other images, you have a jet video there now too. Are you using jets currently?
We do, yeah. We have since 10 years now. So in 2005 is where we transitioned the business to focus on upset prevention and recovery training. By the way, we still do the fighter pilot for a day stuff, more for the instructors than anything else, but it's a small part of our revenue. But anyway, in 2008, now we had integrated advanced simulation, level D simulation into our program. So we're able to take those high fidelity human factors and transferable skills, then demonstrate how they do transfer into commercial airplanes. And, to make sure, because I'll tell you, you can take an extra 300 and teach things that are potentially catastrophic in a commercial airplane. However, if you focus on what is transferable and it's done the right way, and you can demonstrate that transferability, the confidence and competence of the graduates goes up dramatically. So the first jet integration was actually advanced simulation. And so in fact, we still do that. We have simulator built right into our facility now. But to your point, in 2016, Roger, it became very clear that we needed jet training as part of our program. Our business was expanding into a lot of corporate executive flight departments, 135 operators, military as well, that were operating turboprop or turbojet or turbofan airplanes. And so we got our first jet in 2016, got our second one in 2019, got our third one just last year. And so it's just going into service in a couple months. So it's the composition of our programs have changed but it really is the integrated combination of readily available platforms like the Extra 300, the Marchetti S211, advanced simulation and virtual reality that allows us to be able to optimize the training for the pilot to meet them where they're at based on what, where, and how they operate. So that was a long answer to a short question.
Oh, no, it's good. It's all good detail. I'm sure this is the kind of thing that the people on LinkedIn want to hear. So about the jets, what are the types? You mentioned the Italian ones, Marchetti. What are the other ones that you have?
No, they're all the same. It's, again, we treat these training platforms as surrogate platforms. So the reason why the jet matters so much, you can imagine as a jet pilot, there's a psychological issue as well. So when jet pilots want training, they want jet training. And so while that is valid, that's not actually the best way to train them initially in upset prevention and recovery training. The very best is to go back to the grassroots of how they learn to be a pilot. Right back to the academics, kind of rewiring their brain and how they think about the all-attitude environment, and going up there and showing them in an airplane like an Extra 300 of the high-fidelity human factors, the fundamental aerodynamic principles, how an airplane functions, the transferable components, teach them strategy so that they can actually function in crisis. And once they have the ability to be able to function and apply strategy, which is essentially a protocol by which they can mitigate an airplane upset back to the heart of the envelope, we then can take them from that high fidelity human factor environment and put them in a complex jet airplane, and now see how that transfers into jet performance with turn rates and radius and performance of jet airplanes. And then not stopping there, now take them to high altitude, Roger. And so the airplanes are all certified to operate up into the 40,000 foot block. We do most of our training at high altitude between 30 and 34,000 feet. And that is a wonderful opportunity for them to get high altitude jet training. And the way it goes from there, once that's done, the integrated piston, low altitude, high altitude jet, then we wrap things up by getting them back into their environment. It's like an accelerated type rating back into class specific simulation and right into type specific mixed reality training and virtual reality, so they get that complete circle of experience, going back to the foundational training principles where we actually cover up the attitude indicator. They have airspeed and altitude only, looking out into the world, building a three-dimensional model, and then circling them all the way back into their very own airplane, seeing the strategies and maneuvers and principles apply in their environment. It truly is the been there, seen that experience.
Okay, that's great. Now, with those jets, they have ejection seats, obviously, right?
They did, but we removed them.
Okay.
It was an intentional, as fighter pilots, we're fine with ejection seat airplane. We had no problem with that. But at the time, we did a survey of our customers, and we found there was a very great fear of ejection seats.
Yeah.
And so what we ended up doing was doing a safety analysis, a risk analysis of the operation of the jet with and without ejection seats, and ended up being about a wash. Because of the fear and potential, harm of using ejection seats and the, some of the issues associated with them, we decided to remove the ejection seats and did a very comprehensive risk analysis that we make available to our customers that they want to see it, as to why the non-ejection seat airplane is an equivalent level of safety as an ejection seat airplane. It wasn't for cost. It wasn't for anything other than our customers being comfortable in their training platform.
Right. And yeah, that comes with a bunch of hassle too, I think, with explosives, etc. It's a huge additional complexity that adds to it. That's very interesting how and I can see how that would be, that it works out being about the same for the type of flying you're doing. It's a wash as far as safety goes. They're equal.
It is, and at the time I was very, very clear with the team doing the analysis. I said, this is not about price. This is not about complexity. This is not about anything other than finding the best compromise for our customers. If that's ejection seats, that's what we're going to do. And if it's not, then you better demonstrate why. And so as it turned out, they did. So it was great. And as I said, they were all military fighter pilots with thousands of hours flying an ejection seat airplane, and they made the decision to remove them.
Right. So tell us about the kind of students that come to you. What groups do they fall into, and how long are the courses?
Yeah, so I think my answers are a little long here, Roger. I hope
No,
that's
no, that's fine. We got lots of time. I got all day.
okay.
Don't
Okay.
worry. Yeah.
So yeah, so it's interesting. So years ago we used to segment our audiences into how they operate: military, corporate executive, flight school, airline, and so on. But we actually now look at them as audiences. And so there's really three main audiences that APS serves. The biggest audience is professional pilots. So that includes flight departments. So for example, regulatory UPRT, so airlines and flight schools and everything else. So at the end of the day, we serve professional pilots, but we can segregate them into three audiences. The first one's called flight department UPRT. So for example, corporate executive 135 operators, military agencies, government agencies, type club organizations that operate very much like professional pilots would fall into what we call our flight department UPRT programs. This next one is regulatory UPRT. So we license airlines like United Airlines, Delta Airlines, Fiji Airways to implement our program in their fleets, where they have core cadre experts in UPRT that come to APS for training, and then they take that license program back into their wide variety of Boeing and Airbus fleets of airplanes. And we also actually go to the other end, the beginning of the program. We license a program with United Aviate Academy, where they actually outsource their cadets to come to our program, and we take them through UPRT. So that airline flight school focus is on regulatory UPRT implementation. Then our last audience, our third one, is just our recurrent folks that are coming back all the time. So while the main business of APS is professional pilots, it segregates into that flight department, regulatory, and recurrent audiences that we train.
Okay, and let's say somebody from a flight department, they would come for, how long would they come for?
Yeah. So
and how much classroom and how much flying and how much sim?
Yeah, so it's interesting. For years, I would say the first 8 or 9 years of our business, probably up to the point where we ended up transitioning ownership, is we tried everything under the sun to try to get a program that was 1 or 2 days or 1.5 days to train pilots. And as it turns out, if you want to save lives and you want to be able to save your life, you need at least 2.5 days of training and at least 4 flights. And we have tried every way to do it. And just the human brain doesn't get conditioned or habituated that way. It takes that amount of time to truly give your body the ability to overlearn counterintuitive competencies and skills. So our programs, the only ones we offer, are 2.5 minimum day programs. Typically 3-day programs is what we see. And so in that, to answer your question, Roger, we fly as much as pilots can stand. And that's not as much as you would think. So on the first day, we do about 4 hours of academics to get split by 1 introductory flight. And that is really to make sure they get comfortable to the program, because it's a business-to-business operation. The people that show up usually aren't the decision makers that decided to come and train with APS. It's their chief pilot or director of flight operations who made the decision for them. So one of the things that ends up happening on day one, there's a lot of psychology involved, because they'll show up saying, I don't need to be here. Or these guys are just a bunch of fighter pilots that are a bunch of cowboys. They're just going to here to show off and get me sick. And so on day one, and we don't have to do much about it, the program speaks for itself, is they will show up, go through the academics, understand that maybe the way they were connecting the dots in aerodynamics is not really exactly the right way to do it when it comes to the all-attitude environment. Go on their first flight, and I will tell you, Roger, after the first day, they are converted. They now realize that there's an entire world out there that they had not been exposed to in their aviation training career. And the real training, once we get the psychological part behind on day one, the real training starts on day 2, where there's 2 flights. There's another couple hours of academics. Then on day 3 is typically just flying, where we'll do either a final flight in the piston airplane or their first flight in the jet, or they'll go to high altitude training. Then the last day, the timing of simulation is always on the 3rd day, where they have high fidelity human factor motion cueing kind of ingrained into their brain and their experience, and we can really magnify and augment the value of advanced simulation and virtual reality that way. So that's kind of what it includes: academic, on-aircraft, piston, jet, low, high, advanced simulation, and virtual reality, to wrap it up.
Yeah, well, that's an amazing course. I hope to be able to take that someday with you. And now let's talk about your videos. The quality of your videos is amazing. The production values, the clarity, the graphics, everything. So do you have a team who does that for you, or do you do it yourself? How do you do that?
I largely do it myself, primarily because I want to. And I think that, you know, it was, we do have a marketing team, don't get me wrong. Once the video's done, our marketing team runs with it and away it goes. I just enjoy doing it. So maybe to step back one little bit is that a number of years ago, as CEO, as we were expanding our sales and marketing part of our business, we had several false starts with trying to find some leaders that could come in and help us with that. So a number of years ago after COVID, I'd say 3 years ago now, I had to step in as the interim executive vice president of sales and marketing. And so I had the opportunity of developing the sales team and the marketing team, and getting into a lot of marketing training myself. And as it turned out, I found out that I really, really love communicating what we do as an organization. But I also found that there was a big gap in the information available out in the industry when it comes to loss of control in flight and how it relates to so many dimensions of how we operate. You've seen the videos on, you know, and go around, swept wing stalls, high altitude operations, startle surprise factor. So about, I'd say 3 months ago, Roger, I decided, well, you know what? I just want to get serious about doing this and try to do a video every couple weeks on a relevant topic. And so the cycle is about a 2-week cycle every video. I do about a week of research. Once I get the script down, I do about a day of recording, and then about another 4 to 5 days of just editing to get the appropriate clips in and so on. And so I'm kind of excited about that because I think it's a great way to engage people out there, to help them get educated at a distance. And at the end of the day, the purpose of APS is that we help pilots bring everyone home safely. And these videos, I think, help them do that. And so it's really on purpose and on mission for APS, the videos that we're doing. Yeah,
they're definitely excellent videos. And I think people love them on LinkedIn. You're building your following at an amazing rate. And you can see from the comments that people really appreciate them.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things kind of on top of that is I finished my MBA last year, so I started to do I'm doing a Master of Science in Social Media Marketing right now, and I'm learning about the modern world of communication and the branding position, and it's really interesting to see that while you can put content out there in social media like LinkedIn, to your point, Roger, it's really the audience, it's really the community that carries the brand now. It'll win or lose based on its merits, right? And so one of the things that I try to do is get great information out there, make sure that I'm engaging, but not too much. Try to let the comments coming in from our community to really support what's going on and to respond to each other. So I usually give it a few days or more before I start getting in there and answering some questions. And the point of that is kind of adopt sort of the modern brand approach to business in the modern day, to understand that social media is really critical in that, especially for LinkedIn. For us, is such a wonderful community because that's where essentially professional pilots are. They're in LinkedIn, and that's kind of where we want to be. We want to be where they're at and give them information that they appreciate, need, and can use in the operational world. Yeah, there's a big aviation community on LinkedIn. It's really good, isn't it? Really is. Fantastic. Yeah. Now, without somebody going on your course, let's talk about some of the weaknesses that are in flight training that could maybe be addressed by training organizations and airlines. What can they do without, I mean, obviously people would want to go on your course, but let's say that they're not able to, or the organization isn't able to do that. What are some things airlines and training organizations could do to make things safer? Yeah, you know, one of the exciting things in recent years, Roger, is the fact that, gosh, back in 2010, there was a huge initiative globally with 40 organizations, 80 experts from around the world that came together with the Royal Aeronautical Society that ended up being foundational to the development of the ICAO manual on airplane upset prevention and recovery training that was released in 2014, a number of years later. And I think the exciting part, the reason why I'm starting with that to your question is because prior to that, there was a lot of contradictory information. You know, there's the entire philosophy of minimizing altitude loss in a stall, not managing angle of attack. And so the release of the 2014 ICAO manual on upset prevention and recovery training, and we were a key part of that process with those experts around the world, was now the regulatory guidance is excellent. And so while it's missing some stuff, it's not missing very much, but the ICAO manual at ICAO is an overarching guidance that now inform the national aviation authorities of how to set standards and requirements when it comes to upset prevention and recovery training. So what you're seeing from that is great guidance at EASA when it comes to, you know, advanced upset prevention and recovery training, but probably the one that's the easiest to articulate is in the United States. We're now seeing a lot of wonderful things. So for example, FAA advisory circulars 12111, which is focused on upset prevention and recovery training, 12109A, which is stall prevention and recovery training, FAA 12123, flight path management. And also, you know, we have the ATP CTP program, which is something that pilots here in the United States need to take before they're an ATP rated pilot. It requires energy management, stall training, and type specific advanced simulation. The reason I'm saying all that is the guidance in the industry right now is excellent. So the very first place to start for organizations wanting to do it right is to go to the regulatory guidance to see what they should be doing. Now, with that said, the devil's in the details, right? While you might know what to do, the real key to the paradigm shift is how to do it. And that's where the industry falls short. And we shouldn't be surprised by that because they've never had to teach it that way before. So the unfortunate fallout of that, Roger, to answer your question, is while there's great guidance, you know, it identifies what to do, since the industry isn't experienced in how to do it, they end up just kind of doing what they did before under a new name. And right. it's really perpetuating the risk of loss of control in flight. So it's one of those situations where it's a little self-defeating, but what organizations want to do it right is they need to select a core cadre of experts, much like an airline would, to go and get training on how to actually do the how. And that's going to make the difference in implementing the program. And some of the key elements of that, for example, is integrating human factor consideration and training. You know, the counterintuitive nature of the all-attitude environment. Many of those areas are completely misunderstood or not understood at all, unfortunately, in the industry. So this process that we're on here, Roger, is not a sprint to the end. It's going to be a marathon, right? It's going to take a lot of years and probably several decades to get there. Yeah, absolutely. And for the manufacturers, what could they do other than the training part, which I know Boeing and Airbus have put out information related to what you just mentioned. What could they do from a design point of view, mechanically and with software and systems? Do you have any ideas in that way? Well, I think both those particular OEMs are doing a great job right now with their fly-by-wire fleets, especially when they have, for example, in the Boeing fleet and the 777, 787 does have capability of reorienting the lift vector automatically. The Airbus that you and I flew, for example, is really probably the most, if not one of the most advanced airplanes in the world with the flight envelope protections and fly-by-wire capabilities. The unfortunate part of that is that while I believe technology is a key to us being safe and ultimately probably artificial intelligence, I think that's a ways away. And as I found, certainly in my Airbus experience, you may have seen that too, is that you become very, very comfortable operating in normal law and have very little exposure to alternate law and the other laws associated with the flight envelope protections. And so what ends up happening is the pilot being the last line of defense. If they get put into a situation where the system has failed, usually a complex airplane will fail in a very complex way. And so it's a very challenging situation to put pilots in that are really immersed into the technology, that don't get a whole lot of hand flying and manual flight operation proficiency, to really be the last line of defense in those airplanes when they fail. So I think the OEMs are doing a great job, and I think in many ways, Roger, they're doing the very best that they can. In our judgment, while technology can help, it's not the silver bullet. I think until more advanced technology such as artificial intelligence is reliably and predictably integrated into the flight deck, I think it's going to come down to pilot training. We have to continue to focus on training the pilot to be ready, to truly be ready as the last line of defense in any situation. And that's really the importance and role of upset prevention and recovery training done right. The gap there, of course, is not the what, it's the how. So I think we have a ways to go, but I'm always a big supporter of technology and flight envelope protections to improve aviation safety. You can't ignore the data that points to the fact that these complex airplanes can put pilots in situations that are very difficult to figure out.
Right. So we have about 15 minutes left, I think. Looking to the future, you've mentioned some of the plans for your company going forward. What can you tell us anything else about how you see your company growing, maybe with other locations or adding other aircraft or systems, anything in that regard?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the exciting part right now is that we're doubling down on the how of what I just talked about, Roger. So we released in 2019 a standard called the Every Pilot in Control Solution Standard. And it's a freely available standard that can be used by any operator around the world, whether they're doing academic only upset training, on aircraft, simulator only, or integrated like we are, to give them guidance on how to truly establish themselves as a provider that can provide effective upset prevention and recovery training, because there's more to it than that. So right now, there's a big initiative underway to get the Every Pilot in Control Solution Standard out into the industry and be adopted to address the how. But after that, there's other levels to that we already implemented APS, which are personalized protocols, and we kind of talked about it earlier. That you, for example, let's say you're flying a Citation 10, the type of UPRT program that you need as a multi-engine high-performance jet operator in a crewed environment is very different to the VFR only single pilot Cessna pilot. In today's world, when somebody does upset prevention and recovery training, they think that they're all the same. Well, they're not. And what that's called is personalized protocol. So for example, Roger, if you came to me as a Citation 10 pilot, your program that we would build for you would integrate many, many things that the Cessna pilot would not need. Jet training, high altitude training, advanced simulation in that business class airplane that is very, very different than what that particular person would get. So our future that we're focusing on, while we're excited about expanding, and we did for a number of years, we're now really doubling down on our facility. Our headquarters in Arizona is really being the nexus of UPRT excellence to help the industry adopt the how of implementing upset prevention and recovery training, and establishing standards that can be freely integrated around the world to do it right, to be able to actually save lives, just not go through the checkbox process of meeting regulatory minimums. In our judgment, the regulatory minimums won't be the paradigm that's going to ultimately overcome this threat of loss of control. It's going to be focusing on developing highly competent instructors who then develop pilots who have much more dimensionality to their ability to function in a higher risk, potentially time-critical environment that we often see in an airplane upset.
Right. And how can people reach your company if an airline or an operator out there or a government agency is interested in reaching out to you about your training?
Yeah, of course. First off,
join
me on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. It'd be great. But if you're really ready to start looking into it, we've made it really easy on our website. So if you go to apstraining.com, that's Alpha Papa Sierra Training.com, and there's just one of three things to do. You can just click where it says schedule a call, and you can speak to somebody very, very quickly, if not the same day. You can click on our phone number and call us. But also right on that homepage, there's a video, there's a tab you can click on that says, how does APS mitigate my risk? And so if you're really curious about that, click on that, and that will give you the idea of how we approach overcoming the threat of loss of control. Then the next step, click on schedule a call. We look forward to talking with you and seeing you here at one of our locations, probably most likely in our headquarters.
Okay, that's great. Well, I can see that your communication skills are coming out through how you're approaching your website, and it looks very good. And
Well,
you know, I mean, I have a very similar interest in communications and website features as well. And there's a lot of ugly and improper design out there that makes it hard for all kinds of barriers to actually talk to somebody at the company. So you've done a great job there.
well, that's not me. That's our marketing team. And so they're the ones that put all that together. The idea behind it is make it a very short process to be able to talk to somebody to get help.
Yeah. So, well, thank you so much, Paul. It's been very educational for me, and I hope interesting for the audience out there on LinkedIn. And we look forward to seeing further aviation videos from you. And I really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you, Roger. It's been great. And of course, you know, I always have to double down on our purpose of we help pilots bring everyone home safely, but I think our brand promise speaks loudest. Every pilot trained in control all the time. That's what we're here for. That's what we do. That's why we get up every day. But thank you, Roger, for doing this for everybody out there.
You're welcome. And hopefully we can do it again sometime.
I look forward to it.
Okay. Thank you.